Hi, I'm Tom Birkeland, author of An Introduction to the Policy Process and professor of public policy at North Carolina State University. I hope you enjoy the book, and I hope you find these videos useful.
Well, welcome to Chapter 4 in the textbook, which is official actors and their roles. And in this chapter, what I want to do is help you to understand the difference between official and unofficial actors in the policy process. Official and unofficial actors are really important. And I want you to understand the difference between them and the role they play in the policy process. This chapter also helps to prepare you to understand the role of interest groups in power and policy making. Interest groups in power in the policy process are central concepts that we'll return to over and over again throughout the book and throughout many of the ideas that we discuss later. But before we go there, I want to discuss ways in which political science has approached the study of political life and public policy, both in the United States and in other democracies. And we can look at it in terms of three approaches or three eras of study. And the first of those is institutionalism. And institutionalism means that we studied political institutions like the courts or the executive branch or Congress or one house of Congress like the House of Representatives or the Senate. There were a lot of books written about these bodies, and we studied the bureaucracy and things like that. And that was a dominant approach to political science and American politics and studies of American politics until about the Second World War, when we moved into something called behaviorism. Insights from psychology and other disciplines, economics, sociology, were taken up by political scientists. And we started to understand the political behavior of people. That is, the behavior of people within political institutions, such as how do members of Congress behave? How do decisions get made by courts? How do judges make decisions? How does the president make decisions? Things like that. And then that extends to individual behavior in the political system, like voting behavior. How do individual people behave in political institutions? How do we choose who to vote for? How do we choose whether to vote at all? How does public opinion work in the process? And that's all very much a part of the behavioral revolution in the social sciences in the middle part of the 20th century. But later in the 20th century and into the early 21st century, we moved into an era we might call neo-institutionalism, which is the idea that political institutions still matter, that Congress as an institution matters, the presidency as an institution matters. So what we understand is that institutions are important in the making of policy and political decisions, but there are people that work inside those institutions. The people shape the institutions, but the institutions shape the people. And finally, there's also been a change in recent years in understanding what an institution means. Later in the book, you'll read about Elinor Ostrom's institutional analysis and development framework, and she talks about the idea of an institution as being things like rules and norms, rather than, say, a constitutionally defined body that you could exemplify, say, with a building. An institution in this sense that Ostrom means it in is a little looser, and it means things that we've agreed to do in a system, like the way we've agreed to settle disputes as an institution. And so those are important things to keep in mind as you consider the role of unofficial and official actors in the policy process. So the official and unofficial actors in the policy process is our next topic. And the question I ask first is, what are official actors? What makes them official? Characterized as a difference between unofficial actors. What makes unofficial actors unofficial? Are one set of actors more legitimate than another? In short, no, they're not. In our political system, we have a system of open participation in which people are allowed to join the policymaking process and influence the official actors, the elected officials, the appointed officials we sometimes call bureaucrats, the civil service, courts, other institutions. But there's no question that people have a right to participate. Now, the traditional institutionalist view of formal institutions is that they automatically have power and authority by virtue of their status in the Constitution. And if you read the Constitution, you'll see a list of all the powers that Congress has. And Congress has a lot of powers as delineated in the Constitution, but they're also constrained by things like the Bill of Rights and other enactments. So, but what we assume is that institutions have power and authority to make policy. We assume that they're relatively stable, but the question is, are government institutions monolithic? More to the point, is government taken together monolithic? And I think you're going to find that it's not just one big organization speaking with one voice. And with that in mind, the question is, do they have the final say in policy debate? Is a policy debate over after Congress has passed a law and the president has signed it and then it's implemented by the bureaucracy? Probably not. And we're going to delve into more of that as we go along in our studies of the policy process. But the idea traditionally is that their decisions are simply accepted, we implement them, and we move it on. And this is an ideal type of policymaking. Also part of this ideal type is that interest groups are petitioners or sometimes supplicants, that interest groups come to Congress or a legislature or a city council and ask for something from that body rather than being part of the mix of participants in the process. That's a subtle difference, but it's an important difference. A more realistic view of the way policy is made at the intersection of unofficial and official actors is the idea that power and authority must be earned and reinforced, that government must earn the trust of people for whom policies are implemented. It must reinforce its authority. And if people reject its authority, if they say, I'm not going to go along with that, they have to reach into their stock of political capital to induce people to want to follow a particular policy. Under this more realistic view, government institutions are broadly stable, but they're not at all monolithic. There's a lot of different committees in Congress, for example. The House and the Senate are two different bodies. Even when they're held by the same political party, the House and Senate are jealous of their own prerogatives and protect themselves against both the other branch of government, the other House of Congress, and the other branches, the executive and the judicial branch. So they don't all speak with one voice all the time. To say the U.S. government speaks with one voice would be mistaken, because we have the three branches of government and sometimes they're in conflict with each other. And that is not surprising given the constitutional design of three branches of government. And finally, they don't always have the final word, government institutions. Decisions often lead to counter-mobilization. What does that mean practically? Well, the counter-mobilization means that decisions are not final and they're not always accepted by everybody. And then the policy process, if you considered a cycle, starts anew with people that are unsatisfied with the decisions, pushing back on the decisions that were originally made. So interests and members of formal institutions work together, not apart, in pursuit of policy goals. This looks more like the behaviorist approach than it does the institutional approach. So the institutionalist approach, or the hierarchical approach, looks sort of like this, where you have the Constitution and the people, and then the three branches of government that work for us, and then the bureaucracy is under the supervision of the senior levels of the executive branch, political appointees. You have the legislative branch, which I could have broken out into the House and the Senate, and then the judicial branch includes both the Supreme Court and the lower courts. This looks kind of like a hierarchy, and it looks like it's really separate, that everybody is kind of in their own box and doing their own thing. But a more realistic view of the system is more like a network in which you have two coalitions or more coalitions that include actors like government agencies, legislators, the news media, interest groups, experts, political parties, and others, even everyday citizens participating. And the two coalitions work in the policy process to move policy ideas forward or to block policy ideas they don't like. And those two coalitions are mediated by policy brokers or policy entrepreneurs. That is, people whose role it is to broker between the two coalitions to see if some resolution of a policy dispute can be sought. So with that, think about your experience with public policy and how you see it working in the United States. Is it characterized by hierarchy, or is it better characterized by networks of people working together to try to accomplish public policy goals? In the next video, I'll discuss the structure and function of the official actors in the policy process.
Thanks for watching this video. As always, I really enjoy hearing from students and teachers about the book and about public policy. Feel free to reach out to me at tom@tomberkland.com or visit my website, tomberkland.com. Thanks again for watching.